Nobody knew her name. That was the point. She would arrive in a new town, wearing a man's coat, a man's hat, walking with the kind of ease that makes people assume you belong wherever you are. She would find the square, or the fair, or the tavern courtyard where people gathered. She would wait for a crowd to form, and then she would fight. Not brawl, fight. Clean, precise, devastating swordsmanship that left grown men staring at the ground, trying to understand what had just happened to them. And every time someone refused to believe what they had seen, she simply took off her hat. This is the story of Julie d'Aubigny, before Paris knew her name, before the opera, before the king, when she was just a woman with a sword, a road in front of her, and absolutely nothing to lose. To understand why Julie was on that road at all, you have to understand what she was running from. By the time she was 17, Julie had already lived 3 lives. She had been raised among soldiers and court pages at Versailles, trained in swordsmanship by her father. From the age of 12, she had been made the mistress of a powerful count before she was old enough to refuse. She had been handed a husband she never wanted, who was conveniently shipped off to the provinces, so the count could keep her close. And then she had run away. Not long after her marriage, Julie became involved with a fencing master who was already on the run after killing a man in an illegal duel. Together, they fled the city. His name was Seran. He was skilled, reckless, and exactly the kind of trouble Julie seemed to find in every room she entered. They headed south, away from Paris, away from the law, away from every arrangement other people had made for her life. And they needed money. So they did what they knew how to do. They performed. Dressed as a man, Julie would give fencing demonstrations with Seran at fairs and taverns across the French countryside. During her performances, she would sing and then challenge the audience to duel against her. Think about what that looked like. To the people watching, a slender young man steps into the ring, confident, unhurried, takes on challengers one after another, moving with a fluidity that makes the other fighters look like they're standing still. Then, between bouts, that same figure opens their mouth, and a voice comes out that stops people cold. Not a man's voice. Something richer, stranger, more arresting than anything they expected to hear in a tavern courtyard on a Tuesday afternoon. The crowd always grew. Some people came back the next day just to see if it was real. Julie was still mostly disguised as a man during these performances, but she wasn't hiding who she was. Exactly. She was doing something more interesting than hiding. She was making people question what they thought they knew about what a person could be. She and Seran made their living holding these demonstrations, singing in taverns, performing in local fairs. As they made their way toward Marseille, it was not a glamorous existence, but it was hers, for the first time in her life, entirely and completely hers. At some point during these road performances, something happened that people would repeat for the next 300 years. A man in the audience refused to accept what he had just seen. When he claimed she was a man, due to her sword-fighting prowess, she ripped open her shirt and asked the spectators to judge for themselves. The crowd went silent. Then they lost their minds. There is something almost too perfect about this moment, because what Julie was doing was not just proving a point about her gender. She was proving something about the entire structure of assumptions the world had built around her. You assumed I was a man because I fight like this. You assumed only a man could move like this. You assumed your own limitations were universal. She showed them they were not. And then she put her shirt back on and probably asked if anyone else wanted to go. It is easy to look back at this period of Julie's life and frame it as a desperate scramble for survival. Two fugitives on the road, scraping together coins from tavern crowds. But watch it more carefully. Julie was, in this period, becoming something. Every challenger she defeated in front of a crowd was a lesson. Every audience that gasped, every man who walked away shaking his head, every woman who watched from the back of the crowd, with an expression nobody around her could quite read. They were all part of something Julie was building. A reputation, not yet a name, not yet La Maupin. But the shape of her was forming. The outline of a legend was being drawn in the dust of road towns and fairgrounds across the south of France, one duel at a time. In towns and villages, she would draw crowds by singing, and then challenging any man in the audience to a duel. Those who accepted often regretted it. Julie not only defeated them, she humiliated them. She was good at the humiliation part. Historically, reliably, enthusiastically good at it. Eventually, inevitably. Julie and Seyran arrived in Marseille, and eventually, just as inevitably, Julie and Seyran fell apart. She left Seyran, and once again on the run, dressed as a man, she encountered a young nobleman on the road. His name was Louis-Joseph d'Albert de Luynes. He was well-born, a skilled swordsman by the standards of his class, and he made the mistake of insulting what he believed was another man. Words were exchanged, as words tended to do, around Julie. A duel followed. She parried his thrusts and slashed him in the shoulder with the clean efficiency of someone trained since the age of 12 in the courtyards of Versailles. And then, because she was Julie d'Aubigny, she asked about his health the next morning. She nursed him back to health, and they fell in love. Not romantically, though this was Julie, so nothing was ever entirely simple. The Count d'Albert would remain one of her closest companions for the remainder of her life. Not despite the duel, because of it. She respected people who fought back. She just didn't always let them win. By the time Julie left Marseille and turned her face toward Paris, she was carrying something new with her. Experience. Real experience. Not the controlled lessons of her father's courtyard. Not the theoretical dueling of court pages. She had fought strangers in unfamiliar towns, for money, in front of crowds who wanted blood. She had won every time. She had turned defeat into friendship, and poverty into performance, and the open road into something that looked, from a distance, remarkably like freedom. Paris was waiting. The opera was waiting, though she didn't know it yet. And the king, somewhere in his palace at Versailles, was about to hear a name for the first time, La Maupin. But before the opera house, before the royal balls, before the death sentences and pardons and scandals that would make her the most talked-about woman in France, there was one more thing Julie needed. She needed Paris to forgive her for burning down that convent. How a woman with a death sentence over her head walked back into the city that had condemned her and convinced the most powerful king in Europe to simply let it go is a story that deserves its own telling. That story is next.